Yo, what's happening, baby? This is the Flaming Sword Music, and I'm Musing. The subject that I want to discuss today is the subject of the movie, Viola Davis movie, The Woman King. I have two misgivings about this movie. The first, I'm just going to get out the way. I can't really get too deep into it because I haven't really etched out everything, but it's just something weird to me about the title Woman King. I'm like, you know, it just reeks of agenda. You know what I mean? And I feel that the agenda that it reeks of really gives an opening to my next point that I would like to discuss a little bit more in depth. And that is the fact that, I haven't seen the movie. I'm actually going to watch the movie, but I see certain things about the reviews of the movie that I feel reeks of agenda too. And that agenda is like a tendency that Americans have to misinterpret the American experiment on slavery and pretty much try to say that, oh, slavery is slavery. But my misgivings with the presentation of the movie and how it may come across or whatnot reeks of an agenda that pretty much says that, we're going to try to interpret, because, it's long been an argument of people who participated in the American slavery experiment that, slavery always existed. You know, blacks enslaved each other, the Hebrew, everybody enslaved each other, and I contend that that is true. Yes, slavery is pretty much as old as prostitution. You know, prostitution was the original slavery, if you want to put it like that. That's how I look at it. Prostitution was the original slavery. And every form of slavery that we've seen through the history and times of mankind are just variations of prostitution to me. But getting back to what I'm trying to say is that, yes, it's true. Slavery has existed for quite a while throughout the human experience. And a lot of the people who speak of the American experiment as slavery, they want us to believe that, these are the same ethics and principles that that happened during the American slavery experiment. And I contend that that's not quite true, because if you go through like the religions, the Bible, the Quran, the ancient religions, slavery was quite different from how it was portrayed in the American slavery experiment. Namely, I think that slaves were way more humanized. Like, I think that it was more like a contract between the slaves and the government, or not the government, but the powers that be, because I don't think government existed then. I just think that there was a powers that be. Like to say there were no private slave owners. All slaves were slaves of the government. So, that's a different discussion. But there were agreements. In most of the ancient forms of slavery, slavery was actually like indentured servitude. Slaves had the ability to earn their freedom. History is replete with stories of people who were taken as slaves who were able to achieve positions of prominence and even authority in the very countries that enslaved them. You got Bilal from Islam. What's dude named the Gladiator that they made the movie from? You know, a lot of royalty found their origins in being enslaved in another culture. So the main difference between the ethics behind the American experiment on slavery was the fact that slaves were dehumanized. They said, y'all not even humans. Y'all 3/5 of a human. Not only that, but God ordained that you guys be slaves. So it created an ethic where people might think that, oh, when we watch the Ten Commandments, you know, yeah, it was likely that slaves were worked to death because slavery is the original prostitution. They was worked to burnout. They were manipulated into servitude longer than their contracts stipulated. Like, let's just say, for the sake of an argument, if I'm a slave and the contract says I work 7 years breaking my back, and in the course of them 7 years I get a wife and kids, then okay, cool, you free, but we keeping your wife and kids. So that basically means that I'm not free. You know, so, you know, the same type of stuff that happens in pimping. You know, you're going to do what you can, like David Chappelle said, to reset that burnout phase so that, you know, your slave can continue to work of his own will and accord. Where in the American slavery experiment, that option was taken away. That's why you have the whips. That's why you had all the torture instruments. That's why you had all the abominations that showed during the time of the American slavery experiment that just really didn't exist in other forms of slavery. Because the slaves in other forms of slavery, especially the ancient forms of slavery, weren't dehumanized. And I believe that the movie The Woman King is going to try to say that, oh, Africans handed slaves over to Americans to be slaves. And, you know, it very well might be true, because that's something that's been happening since prostitution. Slaves were handed over, traded since slavery. That's the nature of slavery. But I don't want people to think that, yo, they weren't handing their slaves over to a system other than the system that they knew of. As far as they were concerned, they were selling slaves to people who would treat slaves the way that they treat slaves. As far as they were concerned, it probably took them a while to catch on and realize, like, yo, nah, this is not something that, you know, we're handing our people over to be dehumanized, and, you know, we're dehumanizing ourselves. I mean, I don't think that they thought that far ahead. And I'm not even going to say that far ahead, but I don't think they shifted the logic and the ethic of what they thought slavery was and allowed for another concept or application of slavery. And I want people who try to say, oh, Africans handed slaves over, they sold slaves. Yes, slavery existed forever. But there were different concepts of slavery, and the American experiment at slavery is an anomaly. It's nothing like most of the forms of slavery that we've seen. And we need to consider that when we hear the phrases, and people talking about, oh, Africans participated in the slave trade. Yes, but Africans didn't participate in the American experiment of the slave trade. I hope that you people have gotten something out of this. I'm still working on everything that I think about. Like I said, this is a musing, not an opinion. But I still feel like there's some type of validity to it. And I hope that whoever listens to this gets something out of it. My name is Musing Khan. Be blessings and be blessed. One.